Hi, everybody. This is Alan Peterson with Meet the Thriller Author, and I'm very excited to introduce a very special guest today. I have Russell Blake, who's a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of dozens of thrillers and mystery novels, action-adventure, including the Jet and the Assassin series. And he's also co-authored novels with the legendary Clive Cussler, and he's joining us here today. Russell, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Glad to be here, Alan.
How you doing?
You know, I really can't complain. I mean, I do constantly, but I can't. I shouldn't.
For listeners who aren't familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. I'm an author. I live in Mexico, and I have now for about 15 years. I started self-publishing in June of 2011, and since then I've written, I want to say 47 or 48 novels, and 2 of which were with Clive Cussler. I'm mainly action, adventure, and mystery. Typically turn out, 6 to 9 books a year, like clockwork.
That's amazing. You're so prolific. You're like a legend in the in the business or
notorious. It's not the same as legendary, but I'll take it.
All right, yeah, let's go with legendary and notorious. Yeah, that's just amazing. That's just incredible. I've been following your advice, or trying to follow your advice, on how to do that. What decided to make you try to write a novel, and why did you choose thrillers?
That's what I read. When I'm not reading nonfiction, and I found myself, gravitating to the Ludlum. I grew up on Ludlum and Cussler and that sort of thing. So, when I decided to try my hand at it, Tom Harris was another one that I really liked. When I decided to try my hand at it and self-publish, I just wrote what I personally would want to read. So, that way I figured if nobody bought it, at least I would have entertained myself.
Yeah, at least you had fun with it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because the odds say that you're not going to, that nobody else is going to read it anyway, so you might as well write what you want to write.
And were you writing a lot before? Have you always been writing before you even decided to try to publish?
Yeah, no, I probably threw away 6 to 8 finished novels before I wrote the one that I published in June of 2011, because they just weren't very good. So, but I decided my own amusement, as I said, when I had time, and sometimes I had periods of time for 2-3 months where I wouldn't be doing much of anything and looking for something to do. So I would write something and then read it a year later, and it sucked, and I'd throw it away. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I didn't inflict any of that on the world.
No plans that they'll never make the light of day? You haven't gone back to check those out?
No, they're gone. I mean, they're they're gone, and the world's better for it.
And so, where do you get your ideas for your books? They're so amazing. All the different series that you have going. Where do you get all these ideas?
Well, Alan, most of it's fueled by booze and dope. But I also follow the news, and
between tequila shots.
Yeah, sure. No, I follow the news, and what my main challenge is to temper reality to the point where it is plausible. So, I mean, any day I can watch, I can look through the headlines and find at least 5 to 10 pretty active and obvious conspiracy theories or lies that are being foisted off on the public. So I just, it's pretty easy for me to to find subject matter.
Yeah, I remember there's an interview that Charlie Rose was interviewing John Grisham, and he asked him about where he gets his ideas. He goes, I steal them from the news. I'm like, yeah, cool.
Yeah, it sure beats working. I mean, otherwise it's not like I sit around all day going, I don't do that.
So when you get an idea, do you jot it down and save it for later if you're already working on something, or?
Nah, I just trust that I'm going to have more ideas as I go. If I come up with an idea and it's a decent one, I just start writing it. I outline it and then put it aside and then write it.
And do you find movies and television, pop culture, do they influence your novels?
Not really. I don't own a TV, and I probably haven't seen a movie in 10 years.
Oh wow, so that's a big no.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe I was influenced by 24 or something back during the Gaslight days, but
Yeah.
no, not recently. I'm sure I've missed a lot of great stuff too, but well, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, you've been very busy too, so.
Yeah, I mean,
And do you ever find like like your own experiences? Do they ever make it into your novels? Like, is it a little bit about your personality in any of your characters?
oh, sure. Sure. I think that all of the characters have different, aspects of my personality. Decision making, an evil sense of humor, a cynical, sort of pragmatic worldview. I like to write characters that are plausible and are plausible because they're complicated. They're neither, all good nor all bad. There's a lot of contradictions inherent, and I think that's what makes characters interesting, is the struggle between, what they should do, what they want to do, what they shouldn't do. That because people are generally not all good or all bad. I mean, even Hitler loved his dog. So it's if you can encapsulate and capture some of that complexity in characters, I find it more interesting. It makes books more interesting.
Yeah, I've read several of your books in your different series, and I always, when reading Black, I kind of think, I'm like, I bet that's more like Russell, the
Oh
Black.
yeah, no, I have a really evil. I'd say I'm more like Roxy than I am Black, but I mean, let me put it this way: those are very easy and fast for me to write. there's not a lot of heavy lifting in terms of imagination on those. So that's my inner dialogue.
Is it more challenging to write when you're writing as a female character versus the male protagonist?
I thought it would be, but no, it hasn't been. Like, I've written 12 Jet books, and I wrote the young adult, sort of romance series, and the first book that I actually published was Fatal Exchange. Really featured a female protagonist. So, no, I think I'm just really in touch with my feminine side. It doesn't matter to me whether it's male or female.
And what are some of the challenges that you encounter when you're writing? If you encounter any, because you're so prolific.
Well, the biggest challenge I find these days is, I'm just constantly living in fear that I've already written it, that I've already, done that scene, or, I've made that point before. So I'm just now afraid of repeating myself more than anything. But I'd say the biggest hardship I had was physical. From just sitting for 10, 12 hours at a time. Once I got my treadmill desk, that was mitigated. But I mean, I was starting to jokingly say, "You're not really a writer if you can still feel your feet." Well, there's some truth to that, and it's an unfortunate truth. So that my biggest hurdles were more physical than mental or intellectual.
So and that's something that I find fascinating with the treadmill desk. That was the first time I really ever even heard of that. Was when I think it was on the blog post or on a forum or something, you had mentioned it. Not to scare the listeners away, but could you describe like a writing day for you?
Sure. Yeah, I get up. I try to be writing usually by 8:30 to 9 o'clock in the morning. I'll go out and grab a cup of coffee and then come back and think about what I'm going to do, and then I start writing. At 9 o'clock, and I'll keep going until maybe it's lunchtime, and grab some tacos or whatever, and then keep going until dinner. And if I haven't hit my word count, keep going until whenever it takes to get to the word count. If it takes till midnight, then I go till midnight. If I'm able to hit my word count by 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, I'm done.
And do you write every day?
Oh yeah, no. When I'm in a novel, there's no other way I can do it. I've tried doing sensible chunks, and it just doesn't work for me. I have to stay fully immersed in the novel until I'm done. So I'll put in 10, 12-hour days when I'm writing a novel.
And what's your process? Do you do like a lot of outlining, or do you like kind of go as you go along, or?
No, I've tried it all possible ways, and I found the most efficient is outlining it. Because basically, people that say, "Oh no, I can't outline, I pants." I mean, I get that. I've done it, and the only difference is, it's the same brain processing the same story and trying to figure out where the plot's going to go. It's just an issue of sequence. It's when you're doing the figuring. So I find it's just more efficient to commit 3 or 4 days or however long it takes to really thinking through the plot and outlining it, rather than doing it as I go along. I can do it as I go along too. It's just it takes me 2 to 3 times longer to finish a book if I do it that way. So I'd rather just outline it. I like to say it's like, if you're in LA and you want to get to New York, it's a lot easier if you got a map. So, get the map first.
Yeah, especially with the pressure, well, not pressure, but like the expectation for indie writers to publish multiple titles in a year. I would imagine that it would be kind of hard if you're just always pantsing it. But I know some people do it, but it would just be.
I think it depends on the genre. Mm-hmm. I think it's a genre. Like if I was writing romance, like I didn't outline my young adult stuff, the romance stuff. I just, I was writing, I want to say I was doing 10 to 12,000 words a day, because it was, first person, present tense. It's all about, how everyone feels and, push and pull of the personalities and their evolution of their romance. So there's not a lot of plot. So you don't have to worry about, the tertiary and fourth subplots, dovetailing at some point by the third act. That just isn't there. So you can just sort of do it more free form. So that's not to diss romance or young adult. It's just, it's a different, it's kind of the difference between sitting down with a piece of music for a symphony versus winging it on a guitar.
Yeah, especially with thrillers, because it's the weapons research, all that stuff that we would get nailed for if we get wrong. I would imagine, it's a lot more of that type of detail than in writing thrillers.
Oh, yeah. No, in fact, my latest one that I'm going to be releasing in February 26th, I actually had a couple of working cops, beta read it just to check it for whether I screwed anything up in the process, because there's a lot of police work involved in the book. So I didn't want to make any gaffes and get something obviously wrong. So yeah, there's some research, and I do advise using beta readers. If you can find beta readers who are, if you're writing, I don't know, prepper fiction, find somebody that's a prepper that really loves guns, that knows all about it, to beta read for you, so that you don't make any obvious mistakes.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Instead of just finding a beta reader, find one with a specific knowledge of what you're writing about. Huh.
Yeah, when I wrote my bio thriller about the lab origins of HIV, I found one of the foremost experts on bioweapons and lab generated retroviruses, and who I consulted and who read it and corrected some stuff for me. So find somebody that knows more than you do about the subject matter, and then have them read it.
And the one that's coming up on the 26th of February, is that an existing series or something new?
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny, because the very first book I ever wrote was called Fatal Exchange, and it was set in New York, and it was, somebody's killing the female bike messengers. That was the overall, that was a sort of quick snapshot summary of the plot. And then the subplot was, and a foreign government is counterfeiting $100 bills, and, they're in New York trying to get a briefcase that was smuggled out of the country back before Treasury can figure out that somebody's basically minting almost perfect $100 bills. So that was my first published novel, 4.5 years ago. This is going to be the second book in that series, and I've had the outline sitting on my freaking desk for 4 years. I really have. I've had it sitting here, and I've stared at it with guilt every day
for 4 years.
Yeah, for 4 years, and it's just a piece of paper, but now it's yellow and it's kind of crumbling around the edges, and it looks like the Declaration of Independence. And I'm like, God, are you ever going to write this? And I just sort of forced myself to sit down and write it.
That's exciting, because I think that's one of the first books I read. Even before I even found out, because you were popping up on all my also bots way back when, and right. That's what I think that was one of the first one, and the one with Silver with the FBI agent.
Yeah, Silver Justice. That was, a couple of years later. I was trying to explain in layman's terms what actually happened in the 2008 financial crisis versus the mainstream media sort of spin on what happened. So I decided to cloak that in fiction and kind of cloak it as a murder mystery.
Yeah, and I was reading on your blog post that you said you did you rewrote the fatal exchange. And
right.
So how does that work? Do you just decided, I'm going to rewrite it, or you started rewriting it, and next thing you knew?
Well, I couldn't really remember that much about it because with 40-something books in between, I was like, geez, what? I vaguely remember it, but I really don't remember it. So I went back and read it over a couple of days, and I went, this could use some real help. I mean, so I just after I finished Fatal Deception, the sequel, I just went back through and polished it up. Just did a rewrite and an edit. Probably killed about 3,000 words that should have never been there in the first place, and eliminated a lot of echoes. And because over time you get better at some of the craft stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of painful to read something that you first wrote 40 novels later, because it's like, oh boy, a lot of it's good, but some of it's just grown out loud. So I tried to eliminate the groaning sections.
Yeah, that's something I've always been very impressed with, when you always are experimenting. You're changing your book covers. You're not just kind of sitting on the success. Seems like you're always tweaking things. What's the process in that?
It's just coming from a background of being an entrepreneur. You're either shrinking or growing. I mean, so you have to always be looking to improve your offering, or somebody is right behind you and will figure out a better way to do it. So I'm just sort of, I'm constantly trying to improve the offering. And if that means rewriting stuff, I'll go back and rewrite. If it means that I dislike a cover, I will, change the cover until it's something that clicks. It's just, that's the business side of it. So, and in business, it's a retail business. It's like, why does Coke advertise? Why does, why do car companies change their models every 6 or 7 years, even if they've got a success? It's because you're constantly driven to improve the offering so that you can improve your sales.
Yeah, somebody said if advertising only worked once, then nobody would keep advertising.
Yeah, it's like going to the gym. You don't just go once and lift some barbells and okay, that's it. Did my job. Woo. Where's the Cuervo? Because I'd be all over that. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. So you have to you signed up for a job. I mean, I wrote a blog like that a while ago. It's like, this is not it's a job. It's a great job, but it's a job. If you're successful enough at it to make a living at it, you have signed up to a job. So just resign yourself to doing the job every day, just like you would if you were working for someone else.
Yeah, your blog is I think it's like a must for aspiring writers or even established writers, because you offer a lot of advice on the industry and pulling no punches, which is I think is what we all need, really.
Well, a lot of people hate me for that. I mean, seriously, a lot of people hate me. It's like, oh, you crushed my dreams. It's like, well, look, would you rather know how things are, or would you rather, somebody tell you that it's all unicorns and marshmallow clouds and, magical thinking? I mean, to me, it does the author community a disservice to paint things differently than reality. Mm-hmm. That's not to say you have to be pessimistic or negative, but it just means that, look, this is not easy and the odds are against you. So just recognize that, get over it, and if you still want to do it, recognizing, the level of difficulty involved in succeeding, then maybe you're cut out for it. Mm-hmm. But don't launch into it thinking like you're going to be the next Grisham because you cobbled together, a whodunit, and and the world's going to take notice. That rarely ever happens. So.
Well, yeah, and even like the big names like that, like Grisham back in the day. I mean, he had to grab all the books himself, put them in his trunk of his car, and kind of went on the road.
The man could write. I mean, the man could write his ass off. If you've ever read, what is it, A Time to Kill, mm-hmm. his first published novel, I mean, it was great. So I'm pretty sure that's not the first thing he ever wrote. Let me put it that way. He's, and as an attorney, you're working with language and you're writing briefs and everything all the time. So you're swimming with the fishes at that point. But he was brilliant, and there's a lot of guys like that. That's your competition.
Yeah, and especially in self-publishing, things change so much. I mean, what was a reality in 2012 is not even close to what it is today, and that keeps changing, huh?
No, and I knew that at the time. I remember I look back at blogs of mine from 2012 and 2013 where I'm going, these are the good old days. Like, we're in it right now. It's never going to get better than now. And I knew it. I mean, I was just like, this is unsustainable. So we were on a parabolic growth with device acceptance. The technology was, all shiny and new and glittery, and people were excited by it. Reading became kind of hip again with a certain subculture, and there was a buzz about it. And there was, Amazon and Apple had disintermediated the traditional supply chain, so they were able to. It was exciting because you didn't have to go through a gatekeeper in New York. So, I just knew this couldn't last. And it didn't. I mean, millions of authors issued forth their work, much of it terrible, some of it great. Readers stopped being all that. It wasn't quite as exciting that, wow, I can get a book cheap or free. It's like there's millions of them now. And the technology was like, yeah, I'm on my third Kindle. Yeah, so we're now in a mature marketplace, and mature markets are much harder to break into. I mean, they just are.
Yeah, we've been competing now with the big publishing houses because even then, some of them have adopted, the promos, the BookBub type stuff, the lower pricing.
But the traditional houses, the traditional houses really have no frigging idea what they're doing in terms of the business from a marketing end for Kindle and for the e-platform. I mean, if they did, they would have been ahead of Amazon by 10 years, and they could have been. Shame on them. So they just they're technophobic in a lot of ways. So that is one of our advantages, is that we're much faster to move, to spot trends, to be able to write to trend if we want to, and to vary our approach. And we're not trying to protect our paper profits. So we're pricing to shift units. We're not pricing to protect other products that are in different markets. So we have some tremendous advantages still.
And do you still publish print editions from your books?
I do. I mean, I put stuff out through CreateSpace, but it's not really a big part of my portfolio. I mean, I won't say it's an afterthought, but it's as close to one as you can get.
And what about audiobooks?
The reason is very simple. Most people have e-readers that are in my crowd.
Yes, right. Mm-hmm. And what about audiobooks? Are you in that market?
Yeah, no, I've produced, I want to say like 18 or 19 audiobooks, and I just did a deal with ACX, where I'm in the process of finalizing a deal where they're going to do the Ramses series. So, cool. That's a viable, and it makes me, more than beer money, so I'm happy about it. But that's also genre specific. Like, some of the romance authors are killing it with audio, and sci-fi kills it in audio. Other genres, not so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think in the thriller genre, I think it's a little bit tougher, especially with...
Yeah, because, I mean, look, who's your reader?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I always tell people when they're looking at genres. It's just like, who is your reader? And, I recognize my reader for a conspiracy thriller or an action-adventure novel is probably not a 26-year-old, woman living in New Jersey. It's just not. It's probably going to be somebody between the ages of 40 to 70 who's probably read several thousand books in the genre by then. So they're going to be fairly discerning, and they're, you better raise the bar.
And do you still find time to read? Do you?
Very rarely, unfortunately. I mean, I love reading, but very rarely because of my production schedule. I mean, right now I'm reading James Lee Burke's latest one, and I'm sort of getting through that, an hour a night. But beyond that, I haven't really been able to read for pleasure very often because I finish a book and then 2 days later I'm slated to start another one.
Yeah.
So,
but James D. Burke, so even though when you do find time to read, you're still going to thrillers or that type action.
yeah, well, I read Burke because I don't know if you've ever read James Lee Burke.
Yeah, he's amazing.
You should. Yeah, he's a masterful use of prose, and I would read a cookbook by him. It doesn't matter. I felt the same way about David Foster Wallace. He could write a guide to making fishing reels, and I would be more than happy to read it because he was just so masterful in terms of his use of prose. But there's very few authors like that. There's very few authors that are working these days whose prose engages at that level. And it's sad, but it's true because the market doesn't reward that.
Right, yeah, they want the punchier, shorter type.
James Patterson is the most successful author on the planet. His average book is 68,000 words.
Wow.
His average sentence, uses between 6 and 8 words.
Yeah.
I'm not making that up. I'm not dissing James Patterson. I think, he's a genius at what he does. But that's what, the majority of readers want. And they're voting with their wallets. So ignore that at your peril.
Yeah.
Now, I do ignore it at my peril, but I recognize that I'm giving up a substantial number of sales because I tend to try to write more, for what I view as adult tastes. I'm not trying to capture the reality show, audience. I'm trying to get a more elevated and hopefully more loyal readership. Because my theory is that if you generate stuff that everybody else could, then why buy yours versus everybody else's?
Yeah.
And so you gotta figure out what your distinctive difference is going to be, and then sort of push on that. And if you're successful, good for you. Your readership will reward you. If you called it wrong, well, you're gonna be flipping burgers. That's...
And how do you interact with your readers? Are they very? Do they email you a lot? Email you a lot? Are you active on Facebook? How does?
Yeah, no, I get probably 100, 150 emails a day.
Wow.
I know it's just crazy sometimes. It's slowed down now, but boy, when I released, when I said I wasn't going to do any more Jet novels, I got hundreds of just furious, like 80-year-old cat ladies threatening to kill me, literally. How dare you? It's like, well, and they all say the same thing. It's like, I just wish she would, you would let them find peace, but keep writing them. It's like, well, okay, but Jet and Hannah go get a soft serve and go for a ride on a pony is not a Jet novel, so they can't find peace. We can't have Jet be a good mommy, and have a bunch of Russians with Kalashnikovs after them. Let's choose one.
Yeah, what the best of both worlds, I guess, huh?
oh yeah, and then I routinely get the other suggest. Well, you should have Hannah follow in her footsteps. It's like, okay, yeah. So now Jet's in a wheelchair. She's wearing Depends, and Hannah is out. No, at some point you need to let the story just wind down and hopefully give it a cathartic ending and move on. But obviously that's not going to happen with Jet because the readers have spoken. So, okay.
Oh, so she's living, she's continuing on, huh? Kicking ass.
She's continuing on. I just released another one just recently, and it did extremely well. So I am not unhappy with the results. I just, I thought that readers would be pretty damn sick of it by now, but apparently not.
And now, what was it like? We talked about those big names. You worked with Clive Cussler. You co-authored a couple of books. That must have been quite an interesting ride.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. I really had to sort of pinch myself to make sure that that it was real. I couldn't believe that I landed that gig, frankly. And I was very happy when I did, and it was a brilliant opportunity and sort of launched me to the next level with a lot of, certainly with the New York publishing community and with his readership. But after a couple of novels with him, I think we did everything that we wanted to do, and it's time for somebody else to pick up that gauntlet. What I was seeing was that the readership. I mean, what's strange is like a reader that reads, say, Jack Reacher. All right, if you co-author a novel with Lee Child, say, I would bet you money that you would see maybe 0.00001% of Child's readership following you over.
Oh, wow, really? Huh.
Yeah, it just doesn't work the way you would think. Because, my brilliant thought was, I'll write with Clive. He's got millions of followers, so some percentage of those will come over and it'll be all good. And that's not how it works. And it doesn't work that way for anybody. None of his co-authors. None of, all you have to do is look at their sales. And it just doesn't happen because people see that brand name and that's what they're buying. They're buying the brand. So when they see a James Patterson novel, he uses a lot of co-authors and they put out a book and, they're ranked number 56,000 or something. Mm-hmm. And yet Patterson's number one for months with because the reader simply doesn't recognize that other name. It's as though it was just, like the publisher's name on it.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because I thought for sure it'd be like, kind of like hitting the lottery.
You and me both, sure. No, and some of them did, but my point being that it's not nearly as significant as you would think it would be. Mm-hmm. But, having said all that, I mean, it was a wonderful opportunity, and I learned all about working with the trad pub community and with with Clive's team and working with Clive himself. I mean, come on. I was like 17, 18 years old reading his books, and now I'm writing with him.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
It's hard to get any better than that.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it is. It's like if Ludlum was still alive, that'd be the only other guy I'd be like, I got to write for this guy.
And you're still staying indie, right, all the way?
Yeah, well, I shop something about once every year and a half, just to keep the dialogue open and see whether anyone wants to bury me in money. But I'm pretty comfortable where I am. I mean, I'm not sure. There's certain types of novels that New York could do a lot if they put their back behind it to turn into really, breakout hits. But for the average novel, they can't really do much more than I can. So, you really want to give up, 4/5 of your royalties for roughly the same sales. I don't think that there's a point. So I think there's specific types of novels that are worth shopping, and if you can get the right kind of deal, you should absolutely. Most of them, there you wouldn't see any big sales bump. Let me put it that way. And so, no point.
You have several series out. Do you write different ones at the same time, or do you just focus on one and then move to the next one?
Yeah, I just write them one at a time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just have a publishing schedule that I just go, okay, I want to release 2 Jet books this year. I want to start a new series. I want to, write another 1 or 2 Ramses books, and that's it. So, I just plug them in and go, okay, maybe a Jet book in the summertime, and then around Christmas, maybe a Ramses book somewhere in the late spring and in the fall, and then the new series, April, May, and June. And if it starts really taking off, then that's what I'll be doing for the rest of the year. That's about as much thought as I give to it. And from there, it keeps me focused. Okay, if I'm going to release a book by X, I better start writing it by Y.
So how many miles do you put in the treadmill when you're done writing?
Well, I just walk fairly slowly, and I probably, when it was all new and, this is pretty cool, I was walking 3 hours a day on it. Now I probably clock an hour and a half, which is maybe 3 miles a day. But that's 3 miles more than I was getting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you find, I've lost 25 pounds.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah, no, you walk 3 to 5 miles a day, 7 days a week, going from sitting around like a toadstool. You're going to see some changes. So I recommend it. I say it's probably more important than any writing class you'll ever take. Or, invest the money in a treadmill desk, because it's pretty hard to enjoy any success you have if you can't walk.
Yeah. That's the problem with the sedentary aspect of this business.
No, and it's, and I meet lots of authors, and they, have the same complaint. They're, oh God, I'm 45 pounds heavier since I started doing this, and my back hurts, and I've got diabetes, and it's like, well, that's because you don't move. Your body was designed to move, and this job requires you to, it's repetitive motion. You're just sitting there, so figure out a way where you're not just sitting there. I mean, to me, that seems obvious. So figure out a way that you're not just sitting there, and then, maybe you'll be healthy. Healthier.
So how many books do you have planned to publish this year?
Boy, my editor's going to kill me. I know, because, she's always like, I've got it in writing. You're not writing more than X. Yeah. Well, I was going to release 5 books this year. That's the truthful answer. And I already had 2 of them in the can when I walked into the year. So, what is it now? It's February. I'm going to start a new one in about a week and a half, and that's going to be the first in this trilogy, this post-apocalyptic trilogy that I sort of came up with the idea for about a month ago. So I'm going to write those 3 books back to back and release them April, May, and June.
Cool.
And then I'll probably, those weren't on the agenda, by the way. So those are kind of, I got to figure out how to tell her that's just one long book, and they're divided up into 3 really convoluted acts. It's like a 220,000 page book.
You can try to sneak it in as one to her.
Yeah, basically as one, so it counts as one. And then, I've got the other 2 in the can. So I'll probably, along with those 3, I'll probably write 2 or 3 more besides that. So this will be a slow year. This will be a 6 book written year.
Oh.
And for me, that's slow. Like every other year, I've written 10. So it's going to, I'm already sort of pacing around going, geez, what am I going to do with all my time?
Well, you have more tequila time, right?
Yeah, but I mean, come on. I'm going to look like a yak. My liver will be so swollen. So it's probably better that I write another debt book than just sit on the beach guzzling margaritas all day long.
Tough decisions.
No part of that sounds terrible, by the way.
Yeah. All right. Well, is there anything else you would like to tell our listeners before I let you go?
Well, no, thank you for the support, number one. I mean, I am shocked and stunned that folks continue parting with their money and investing in my books. I'm pleased with the fact that I have a loyal readership that seems to be willing to consume most of the stuff that I put out. And, I would say to budding authors, just recognize that, this is probably the hardest work you're ever going to do. And anyone that tells you differently hasn't been doing it very long, because it's nothing in life that's worth doing is easy, and this is worth doing, but it ain't easy. Like, easy is not a word I would use with being a writer. Yeah,
especially not successful as your type of success level.
Well, yeah, because I'm doing it with volume.
Yeah.
In other words, I was very pragmatic when I looked at this. I just went, I want to make X amount of money per year. So I don't care whether I have to write 20 books a year or 1 book a year. I want to make that much off of my publishing business, or it's not worth me doing. So then I just sort of looked at things and kind of went, all right, to make that level of money, I need to do X. And that's how I set up my schedule. But now it's just gotten so habit forming. If I'm not writing a book, once every 5 or 6 weeks, I literally, feel like I'm completely slacking, and and like I'll never be able to write a book again.
Wow.
I mean, that's the great fear. Is like, oh, geez, what if those last 50 were a fluke? and now I simply I can't write. So there's this sort of odd, narcissistic, paranoid delusion that sort of, wakes you up in the middle of the night going, what if that last piece of crap that you're trying to turn into a decent second draft, what if that's the last good thing you ever write and you can't write anymore? Because I'm sure that happens. So that's the fear that keeps me sort of producing at a fairly driven level.
Well, it sure is working, and each and each one is, all your books are good. So it's like, it keeps going. So you'll probably have 100 books in the next 5 years, huh?
Well, my editor will be so annoyed. She really will be. But I think 75 to 80 is probably a safe bet.
That's amazing. That is amazing. You're talk about feeling like a slacker. So that's what I'm going to do after this interview. I'm going to go in start writing.
It's funny because I met with an author that was just in town for a day or so, and I was in town, so we got together and we had drinks and everything, and he's had some pretty substantial success, and I was like, dude, what are you doing? I mean, seriously, what do you do all year that you only put out 1 or 2 books? I mean, just tell me how your day goes. You wake up, what do you do? Yeah, you don't know. It's life gets in the way. I'm like, okay, when you had a job, did you tell your boss, oh, sorry, I can't come in today because life got in the way? Because I'm pretty sure you lost your job at that point. So, what you're putting in, 1 hour a day. What kind of result do you expect? And he was like, yeah. So now he's actually generating more books. So I shamed him into writing more.
That's good. I'll have to remember that when I start slacking. I'll hear you going, what are you doing all day?
No, seriously, that's what I do to myself. I'm like, do you want to be a writer, or like if you want to be an NBA guy or a hockey player, a pro hockey player, do you basically just not put on skates or go near the ice 99% of the time? Because pretty sure that's not how it works. So if you want to be a writer, go write.
All right, Russell. Well, thank you very much again for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been very nice talking to you about the business and writing and your books.
Well, it was great being on. I hope it helps somebody, or at least sells more books. See ya.
All right, see ya. Thank you for listening to Meet the Thriller Author, a podcast dedicated to bringing you interviews with authors in the thriller genre. And I'll be posting new interviews on Tuesdays, so stay tuned for that. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can do so on iTunes as well as Stitcher. You can also do it via RSS feed. You can find that on our website at thrillingreads.com/podcast. I also have a mailing list on there. You can sign up to be notified of new podcasts that way as well. So several ways for you to subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on any episodes. I love hearing from listeners. You can reach me via email at podcast@thrillingreads.com. I'm also on Facebook. You can find me there at facebook.com/Meet Thriller Author. I'd appreciate your likes on that page. You can also find me on Twitter at Alan Peterson. You'll find me there on Twitter. I also encourage you to visit my author website if you're interested in my books, and you can find that at alanpeterson.com.